You've probably been eating your whole life, 70 years, maybe more, of breakfasts and dinners and everything in between. And somewhere along the way, someone, a doctor, a magazine, a well-meaning family member, told you what you should and shouldn't eat. But here's something most people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s have never been told directly. The way your body uses food has changed, quietly, gradually, without anyone announcing it. And the eating habits that served you perfectly well at 35 may actually be working against you right now. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because the science has gotten more specific, and almost nobody is translating that science into plain language for people who actually need it. That changes today. And stay with me because about 2/3 of the way through this video, I'm going to share the one shift that most older adults never make. It may be the most important thing you hear all week. Before we get into the specifics, I want to be clear about something. This isn't a diet video. I'm not going to tell you to give up everything you love or follow some complicated plan that requires buying 17 different supplements. What I'm going to do is walk you through what the National Institutes of Health, specifically the National Institute on Aging, actually recommends for adults in the second half of life. This comes directly from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which is the most authoritative nutritional document the U.S. government produces. It's reviewed by scientists, updated regularly, and specifically addresses the needs of older adults. And here's something that surprised me when I looked closely at this research. The guidelines don't just say, eat more vegetables. They break down exactly which vegetables, in what amounts, and why certain nutrients become more critical as we age. They address the fact that most older Americans are falling short in very specific areas, not out of laziness or ignorance, but because the advice they were given decades ago was incomplete. So if you've ever felt confused by conflicting health advice, if you've ever stood in the grocery store genuinely unsure whether something is good for you or not, this video is going to give you a framework that actually makes sense. Let's start from the beginning. Let's talk about vegetables first. And I promise this is going to be more interesting than it sounds. Most of us were taught, eat your vegetables as children. Simple enough. But the research tells us something more nuanced. And here's where most people get it wrong. Not all vegetables do the same job in your body. The dietary guidelines break vegetables into distinct categories, and each category serves a different purpose. Dark green vegetables like broccoli, spinach, kale, and collard greens are packed with vitamins and minerals that support bone health, brain function, and immune response. These matter more as we age, not less. Then there are red and orange vegetables, carrots, sweet potatoes, pumpkin, tomatoes. These are rich in antioxidants and compounds that research suggests support eye health and reduce inflammation. And inflammation, as you may have heard, is connected to almost every age-related condition doctors are concerned about. Starchy vegetables, corn, peas, white potatoes get a bad reputation. But they're still vegetables. They still provide fiber and energy. The key is balance, not elimination. And then there are legumes, beans and peas, black beans, chickpeas, kidney beans, lentils. These are extraordinary foods that the guidelines specifically highlight because they offer something rare. They count as both a vegetable and a protein source. Here's the part that changes everything when you understand it. Fiber. The guidelines emphasize fiber-rich vegetables specifically for older adults because as we age, our digestive system slows down. Fiber keeps things moving. It helps lower cholesterol. It feeds the beneficial bacteria in your gut that affect everything from your immune system to your mood. And most Americans over 50 are not getting nearly enough of it. A half cup of cooked kidney beans, 5 broccoli florets, 1 medium carrot. These are not large amounts. They're achievable, and they add up. The simple takeaway from this section is that when you look at your plate, you want variety in color. Different colors in vegetables generally mean different nutrients. It's not about eating massive amounts. It's about eating a range. Now fruits, and this is where the research surprised me. The National Institute on Aging specifically notes that older Americans generally do not eat enough fruit, not a little short, generally not enough as a population. And the reason matters. It's not just about vitamins. Fruit provides a form of fiber that works differently than vegetable fiber. It's particularly good for your heart and for managing blood sugar levels over time. Here's a practical detail worth knowing. When you eat fruit with the skin on, think apples, pears, peaches, you get significantly more fiber than when you peel it. Something as simple as leaving the skin on your apple adds meaningful nutritional value. Now, what about fruit juice? 100% fruit juice does count toward your fruit intake. But the guidelines are clear. At least half the fruit you consume should be whole fruit. Because when you juice a fruit, you remove most of the fiber. You're left with the natural sugars and some vitamins, but you've lost one of the most important parts. When you're buying frozen, canned, or dried fruit, which are all perfectly good options by the way, look for versions without added sugars. Dried mango with no added sugar is excellent. Dried mango coated in sugar syrup is more dessert than fruit. The practical goal is to look at your plate at any meal and make sure fruits and vegetables together cover about half of it, half your plate. Color on half your plate. Simple, doable, and more powerful than most people realize. Let's talk about grains, because this is probably the food group that has caused the most confusion over the last 20 years. Bread is bad. No, bread is fine. Carbs are the enemy. No, carbs are your brain's fuel. You've heard all of it. Here's what the research actually says, clearly and without drama. Grains, and yes, that includes bread, pasta, rice, oats, and even popcorn, contain carbohydrates, which are the body's primary source of energy. Your brain runs on carbohydrates. Cutting them out entirely isn't supported by the dietary guidelines for healthy aging. But here's the critical distinction, and this next detail changes everything. Whole grains versus refined grains. Whole grains, whole wheat, whole oats, whole cornmeal, bulgur, still contain the entire grain kernel. That means they have the fiber, the iron, the B vitamins, and the natural nutrients intact. Refined grains, white bread, white rice, regular white pasta, have been processed to remove the outer layers. That gives them a softer texture and a longer shelf life. But it also removes most of the fiber and many of the nutrients. Most refined grains are then enriched, meaning some nutrients are added back, but not all of them, and not the fiber. The guideline is straightforward. At least half the grains you eat should be whole grains, not all of them. Half. That means if you have oatmeal for breakfast, you've already hit your whole grain goal for the morning. You don't have to give up white rice with dinner or your favorite pasta. It's about balance, not perfection. One thing worth paying attention to on food labels is that low-fat grain products often compensate for the reduced fat by adding sugar. A low-fat muffin can have more sugar than a regular one. Reading labels matters, specifically looking at both saturated fat and added sugar together. This is why doctors rarely explain this clearly. It requires actually reading labels, which takes practice. But once you know what to look for, it becomes second nature. Protein. This is the food group that becomes more important with age and more misunderstood. Here's what most people don't realize. After about age 50, the body becomes less efficient at using the protein you eat to maintain and rebuild muscle tissue. This is partly why older adults can experience gradual muscle loss, even when they feel like they're eating plenty. The National Institute on Aging emphasizes that older adults should eat a variety of protein sources, and that variety matters as much as quantity. The guidelines specifically recommend 8 to 10 ounces of seafood per week, not just for the protein, but because seafood contains omega-3 fatty acids called EPA and DHA, which research suggests are beneficial for heart health. And for older adults, heart health is foundational to everything else. The best choices are salmon, trout, and anchovies. These are higher in those beneficial omega-3s and lower in mercury than many other options. But here's something important for people who don't love fish or who eat mostly plant-based foods. You can absolutely meet your protein needs without seafood. Eggs, beans, lentils, tofu, nuts, seeds, and legumes all count, and plant-based proteins have a meaningful advantage. They contain no cholesterol, are lower in saturated fat, and come packaged with fiber and other nutrients. 1 tablespoon of peanut butter counts as 1 ounce equivalent of protein. So does 1 egg, 2 tablespoons of hummus, or a 1/4 cup of tofu. A note on plant-based meat alternatives, because this comes up a lot. Products like plant-based burgers are not the same as whole plant foods like beans and nuts. Many of these products are heavily processed and high in sodium. The guidelines draw a clear line between whole food plant proteins and processed plant-based alternatives. Whole, real, minimally processed. That's the principle that matters most in the protein category. Dairy is a food group that often gets complicated for older adults, either because of lactose intolerance, personal preference, or just conflicting information about whether dairy is healthy at all. Let me give you the clear version. Dairy products, milk, yogurt, cheese, are significant sources of calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. These 3 nutrients are specifically critical for older adults because they support bone density, muscle function, and nerve health. After 50, bone density tends to decline, and calcium and vitamin D are among the most important dietary factors in slowing that process. The guidelines recommend choosing low-fat or fat-free dairy options for heart health because full-fat dairy is higher in saturated fat, which can affect cholesterol over time. A cup of yogurt, 1.5 ounces of hard cheese, a cup of milk, these are the reference amounts. And the good news is that yogurt, in particular, also provides probiotics, beneficial bacteria that support gut health, which becomes increasingly important with age. If you don't consume dairy, whether by choice or because your body doesn't tolerate it well, fortified soy milk and soy yogurt are specifically included in the dairy group by the guidelines. They've been fortified with calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin D to provide similar nutritional content. Other plant-based milks, almond, oat, coconut, rice, may or may not be fortified. They're not automatically equivalent to dairy. Check the label. Look specifically for calcium and vitamin D content, and watch for added sugars, which are common in flavored versions. Okay, this is the section I mentioned at the very beginning. The part that I said was worth staying for. And I want to be honest with you about why it matters. Everything we've covered so far, vegetables, fruits, grains, protein, dairy, is important. But it's also information that exists in various forms in many places. What I want to share now is something that the research makes clear, but that almost nobody talks about directly when they're speaking to adults over 50. It's this. The number of calories your body needs decreases as you age, but your need for nutrients does not decrease. In some cases, it increases. Read that again in your mind for a moment. Fewer calories, equal or greater nutrients. That is the fundamental challenge of eating well after 50. And once you truly understand it, everything about food choices starts to make more sense. Here's what this means practically. When you were 35, you could afford to eat some nutritionally empty foods, a bag of chips here, a sweetened coffee drink there, and still hit your nutrient goals because you were eating more overall. Your caloric budget was larger. Now, every single food choice carries more weight, not because aging is a punishment, but because your body is asking you to be more intentional, to get more nutrition out of each bite, rather than just more food. This is why the guidelines use a phrase I want you to remember: nutrient-dense foods. Foods that are high in vitamins, minerals, fiber, and beneficial compounds relative to their calorie content. Dark leafy greens are nutrient-dense. Salmon is nutrient-dense. Whole grains are nutrient-dense. A bag of chips or a sweetened soda. Those provide calories with almost no nutritional return. And here's the piece that I think carries real emotional weight if you're willing to sit with it. When older adults feel fatigued, when their joints ache, when they feel mentally foggy or just not quite right, nutrition is rarely the first thing their doctor explores in detail. But the research suggests that consistent nutritional gaps, not dramatic deficiencies, just consistent small gaps over months and years, can quietly affect energy levels, immune function, bone strength, and even cognitive clarity. You're not imagining it when you feel better during weeks when you've been eating well. That's not a coincidence. That's biology. The reason this changes how you think about food is that it reframes every meal as an opportunity, not an obligation. Not, what do I have to eat, but what can I give my body today? That mental shift, small as it sounds, is what the research-backed patterns of healthy eating are really asking for. Now let's talk about the foods that don't fit neatly into the main groups, because this is where a lot of the practical daily decisions actually live. Oils first. And I say this because oils get either ignored or demonized, and neither is accurate. Healthy oils, olive oil, avocado oil, oils from nuts and seeds, contain unsaturated fats that are genuinely good for your body. They help absorb fat-soluble vitamins like vitamins A, D, E, and K. They provide energy. And they make food taste better, which actually matters for eating consistently well. The guidelines suggest 5 to 8 teaspoons of oil daily for older adults, depending on activity level. This isn't just oil you pour, it's oil already present in foods. Half an avocado contains about 3 teaspoons of oil. A tablespoon of peanut butter has about 2 teaspoons. These count. The guidance is to use oils instead of solid fats. Butter, lard, shortening, when you can. Solid fats are high in saturated fat, which can raise LDL cholesterol over time. Not occasionally, consistently over time. One pat of butter on your toast isn't a crisis. A diet heavily based on saturated fats, maintained for years, is a different story. Added sugars are an area where I want to be direct without being preachy. Foods high in added sugars, sweetened cereals, packaged cookies and cakes, many low-fat labeled products, sweetened beverages, provide what researchers call empty calories. They give you energy without giving you anything else your body needs. And here's where most people get it wrong. The low-fat label can be genuinely misleading. When fat is removed from a product to make it healthier, it often tastes worse. So manufacturers compensate by adding sugar. A low-fat yogurt with fruit flavoring can have more added sugar than a small dessert. Reading the ingredient list, not just the front label, is the only way to know. Look for these words in ingredients: corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, fructose, brown sugar, corn sweetener. If they appear in the first 3 or 4 ingredients, that food is primarily sugar with other things added. Beverages matter more than most people account for. Coffee and tea with no additions are essentially calorie-free and have some research-backed benefits. But the moment you add flavored syrups, whipped cream, or large amounts of sugar, a coffee drink can carry as many calories as a meal, with almost none of the nutrition. Alcohol deserves a brief mention. The guidelines are clear. If you consume alcohol, 1 drink or less per day for women, 2 drinks or less per day for men. Alcohol is not nutrient-dense. It is metabolized differently as we age, and it can interact with medications in ways that become more relevant the older we get. Let me bring all of this together in a way that's actually usable, because information without application is just interesting noise. Everything we've discussed today comes from the National Institutes of Health, drawing on the dietary guidelines for Americans. This is serious, peer-reviewed science, not trend-based advice, not a supplement company's marketing material. And what the science is really saying when you step back from all the specifics is this: your body at 60 or 70 deserves the same thoughtful attention you'd give a high-performance machine. Not perfection, care. Consistent, reasonable care. So here are 5 actions that are realistic evidence-based, and achievable starting this week. At your next meal, physically look at your plate and estimate whether vegetables and fruits cover roughly half of it. Not every meal, every day. Just start noticing. Awareness is always the first step. If half your plate is starch or protein and there's almost no color, that's information, not judgment. Then, upgrade just one grain choice. If you currently eat white bread every morning, try switching to whole grain bread. If you have white rice regularly, try mixing it with brown rice or wild rice until the transition feels natural. The guideline says at least half your grains should be whole grains. One switch starts the shift. Add 1 serving of seafood per week. The guidelines suggest 8 to 10 ounces weekly for the omega-3 benefits. If you're currently eating 0, adding 1 serving of salmon or trout, even canned salmon mixed into a salad, is meaningful progress. Not a rule, not a restriction. An addition. Read 1 label this week, just 1. Pick something you eat regularly, a yogurt, a cereal, a granola bar, and read the ingredients. Look for added sugars. Look at the sodium. Notice what's actually in there. You don't need to change anything immediately. Knowledge first. And finally, drink 1 more glass of water today. This sounds absurdly simple, but the guidelines are clear that beverages matter, and water should be the primary drink. Older adults are more susceptible to dehydration than younger people, and mild dehydration can feel like fatigue, confusion, or headaches. 1 more glass. That's it. Please talk to your doctor or a registered dietitian before making significant changes to how you eat, especially if you have existing health conditions, take medications, or have been advised to follow specific dietary restrictions. The information in this video is drawn from authoritative public health research, but it is not personalized medical advice. Your body, your health history, your medications, these all matter. A professional who knows your full picture is irreplaceable. What I want to leave you with is this. You have not failed at eating. You've been navigating genuinely confusing, often contradictory advice for decades, and you've done the best you could with what you had. The goal now is not to undo the past. The goal is to use what we know today, clear, specific, evidence-based knowledge, to make the next chapter as strong and vital and independent as possible. Because that's what this is really about, isn't it? It's not about following rules. It's about staying strong enough to do the things that matter to you, to be present for your family, to travel or garden or walk with your dog or dance at a grandchild's wedding, to keep showing up as yourself, capable, energetic, clear-headed. Food is one of the most powerful tools you have to make that happen, and now you know how to use it better. Here's what I want you to remember from today. Your nutrient needs haven't gone down with age. Your calorie budget has. So every bite matters more, and choosing nutrient-dense foods across all 5 food groups is how you meet that challenge with grace. In an upcoming video, I'm going to talk about something that quietly affects nearly every older adult's eating habits, and almost nobody discusses openly. And it has nothing to do with willpower or food choices. If you want to keep getting information like this, clear, research-based, and actually useful, subscribing means you won't miss it. Aging well isn't about being perfect. It's about being informed. And you already are. Take good care of yourself.